On this episode of Supercars Talk, I look at why Shane van Gisbergen's great plan of Super2 joining the Bathurst 1000 is not such a good idea. So, one little bit of news that I want to cover this week. Apparently, Shane van Gisbergen came out during the week and said that he'd like to see the Super 2 teams field cars at the Bathurst 1000. So, after they had all those great battles with Brody in the iRacing last week, was like, oh, well, why don't we just get the Super 2 teams and they can race in Bathurst as well? Okay. That is great in theory. Love your idea there, Shane. Sounds great. All of a sudden we'll have fields of, 50, 55 cars again like the old days. In practice, not so simple. Okay, the first problem, I've gone through the Super 2 entry list here. Okay, this is one of the issues. Okay, for starters, Super 2, 13 cars entered at Adelaide. So you're potentially only extending the field by 13 cars. Unfortunately, 5 of those 13 drivers have already got co-drives in the main race. So all of a sudden you either go, okay, so, Brody, he stays in his car for Bathurst. So where do we get the partner for Will Brown? And then all of a sudden, not partner for Will Brown, Will Brown's partner in Reynolds, a partner for Anton De Pasquale. Google in the brain failed me a bit there. Okay, so all of a sudden then you either have to find a co-driver, 5 more co-drivers for the field. So that either puts a lot more pressure on the guys like, Tander, Caruso, Lowndes, James Moffat, who Jimmy Goulding as well, guys who have raced in the main game who have probably been kicked out a little early or, retired. All of a sudden you haven't got those young blokes coming up to get experience, and then also they don't get experience with the main game team, say like Bryce Fullwood last year, where, he was a front runner in Super 2, races in the endurance races, gets a bit more experience in a main team. The main teams can also see what he's like, because sometimes the equipment in Super 2, like the main game, I have heard a few comments already this year about the level of Will Brown and Brody Kostecki. All of a sudden, Brody's kind of jumped into Will Brown's car from last year and it's up the front, and then Will's in the image car seems to be a little bit behind the 8 ball, but who knows whether, Brody's budget might be $1 million for the year, whereas Will's budget might be $500,000 for the year. And all of a sudden, even though it was essentially the same Eggleston car as last year, if you've got, an extra $500,000 to run the car and buy all the latest Triple Eight gear to slot into it, all of a sudden it makes a massive difference. A bit like, realistically, no matter how good Chris Pither is, he's not going to run at the front of the field in that old Techno car that's, it's a bag of bolts, essentially. Yes, it's, it is a Triple Eight car, but it's not the same as a Triple Eight car that, Jamie or Shane's running around in. So you're saying to me, right, Dave, well, okay, there's 5 guys sign up for the main. That still leaves 8 available. So if we go through the list here, we have Brock Feeney, Jordan Boys, Jade Noija, Matt Charter, Zach Best, Angelo Mazouris, Josh Fife, and Zane Morse. Okay. If you're anything like me, because we've only had the 1 round so far this year, some of those names don't really ring a bell. Now, to race in supercars now, you have to have a super license, a bit like with the Formula 1 super license system, basically so you don't get, your weekend warriors or, tools just kind of buying their way into the field. So you have to have finished, you get certain points for certain things, or have finished, in the top 6, I think it is, of the Super 2 series of the year before to, qualify for your super license. So I'm sure that you're probably looking at, maybe Brock Feeney, Jordan Boys have probably got enough points, or, in a position to apply for the super license. I'm not sure about all these other people. So then you kind of go, well, do we lower the quality of driver, to bring that in? And then also, where do we get... They're going to need co-drivers for a 1,000k race. So all of a sudden then, say all of these 8 qualify, then you've got to find another 8 that also qualify for the super license. Now, it could be interesting, you could easily bring in internationals, and there's people like Simona, Marcus Ambrose, Joe Logano, Will Power, people like that are obviously qualified to be able to do the job. But, I don't think you'd even someone like Simona, if, Image Racing turned around and said, hey, Simona, we need a co-driver for Jordan Boys for the endurance races. Do you want to come over? She'd go, yeah, have you got 50 grand, 100 grand, something like that, to come and do that kind of race. They're not doing it for free. I think there's a big disparity in, you've got someone who's the techno guy's probably going to bring some money to the field this year. And as you work your way up through the field to the point where you Triple Eight co-drivers are probably actually earning more than, well, I can guarantee that Tander and Lowndes are earning more to co-drive those Triple Eight cars than what a lot of the bottom half of the field are earning for the year. But you're not so much going to find people that have got the budget to do that. And also, okay, the team-wise, it's probably not as big an issue, say, for like Bathurst, because people have been saying about, the pit stops and that, we don't have enough people to do the fuel and the tyres and things like that. I think you could probably get away with, say, 2 rattle guns and 2 guys for something like Bathurst, because generally those pit stops are determined by the full load of fuel drop. They're not like a sprint race where you might only be putting in, 10 litres of fuel, or you might not be doing fuel at some of those sprint rounds. So I think you could probably get by with, say, 2 tyre guys and 2 fuel guys. So but then also you need a car controller and an airspike guy. So all of a sudden you need 6 pit crew guys for a stop, which is only 2 less than the main game, but at least it is 2 less, and you could probably share with some of the other teams on things like that, because realistically they're not going to be going for the win, so it doesn't matter so much if their guys haven't been training all year for these stops. If they're a couple of seconds slower, it's probably not going to make or break their day, because they're probably going to be a couple of seconds slower per lap than the main guys anyway. The other big issue I see is these guys are running around in Commodore VFs, Nissan Altimas, and Falcon FGXs. Now, in their infinite wisdom, Supercars decided that this year, because of all of the aero crap from the last few years, that currently in the main game you can only run the 2020 ZB Commodore and the 2020 Ford Mustang. Nearly said Falcon Mustang, don't know why. So essentially, none of the Super 2 teams can run their cars. Now, we can probably, if they're a Super 2 team running that car, we could probably overlook the fact, I could overlook the fact if they wanted to run around in a Nissan Altima that wasn't homologated in the main game, because they're not going to win. But someone, Roland Dane, will probably complain because they're going to have some advantage because they've got more downforce or whatever, because they took so much downforce off the Commodores this year. No, they didn't. So essentially, the rules have to be changed somewhat without anyone complaining about them to allow their cars to race, or then you've got to expect them to go and buy like a brand new, Mustang or something like that, or do they convert their Falcon to a Mustang? And then how do you race in the rest of the Super 2 series, because you're not allowed to race a Mustang in the Super 2 series yet? So maybe look at the rules a bit. If it was up to me, this whole thing, the way the series are and that at the moment, I would actually consider having like we used to have, and have a Tier 1 and Tier 2 Supercars license kind of thing. So all the main teams automatically have a Tier 1 license. They have to compete at every round, like how it used to be. The Super 2 teams get a Tier 2 license. Might not even have, say, a prize money thing or anything like that. So you Tier 1s, they get their prize money and whatnot. The Tier 2 ones, you sign up for the year. You have to turn up for 6 rounds, say. One of those is Bathurst. Or, you sign up and you have to be, at the Bend endurance race at Bathurst. Keep them maybe out of Surfers Paradise or something. Or, maybe a first in, best dressed, something like that. Some of those events. I expect no one's going to go to Perth. It has a twofold benefit. You get to bump up the field in most of the rounds, probably all of them, if they shared them around or whatever. It gives the Super 2 guys main game experience. You don't have to commit to the whole year. You don't have to have your whatever budget it is to run a supercar for the year, say your $2 million or whatever. You could run it more like on a Super 2 budget, 500,000 to $1 million. You could have teams like, say, Brad Jones Racing that, loves bringing on the young blokes. If you could sign 2 blokes there, they could do essentially what they're doing with the Super Light program at Matt Stone Racing this year, where you have 2 guys kind of sharing the car for the whole year. They join up for the endurance races, but without that pressure of actually having to put that car at every round. So if it was up to me, that's probably what I'd be looking at the moment, considering the numbers in Super 2, and then maybe the, what is now again the V8 touring car or whatever that was Super 3 last year, have that as a full-on, like they're trundling around in really old cars. That's where you go and learn. That's where you can do it from, say 100,000 to 300,000 or something budget a year. But, you're not getting carried away where you need these, $1-2 million budgets to run for the whole year. So that's just my thought. Let me know what you think. I've signed up myself an email address if you want to get in contact with me, supercarstalk@gmail.com. So until next time, I'll see you later.